Wisdom of Solomon, Chapter 1. Love righteousness, all of you who judge the land. Set your mind on the Lord in goodness, and seek Him in sincerity of heart. Because He is found by those who do not test Him, but He manifests Himself to those who do not distrust Him. For perverse counsels separate a man from God, but when God's power is put to the proof, it rebukes the foolhardy. Because wisdom does not enter into a soul which plots evil, nor does she dwell in a body under a debt of a sin. For a holy spirit of education flees deceit, and withdraws from senseless reasonings. And when unrighteousness approaches, it is convicted. For wisdom is a humane spirit, and she does not acquit a reviler of his guilty lips. Because God is a testifier of his inmost self, and the sure observer of his heart, and the listener of his tongue. Because a spirit of the Lord fills the inhabited earth, and the one who embraces everything possesses knowledge of every voice. No one who utters unrighteous things can go unnoticed, nor will the rightful punishment, when it convicts, pass him by. For the counsels of an impious man shall be scrutinized, but the sound of his words shall reach the Lord, to convict him of his lawless deeds. Because a jealous ear listens to everything, and discordant grumblings are not kept hidden. For this very reason, guard against profitless grumbling, and withhold your tongues from calumny. Because a stealthy utterance does not go unpunished, but a mouth which speaks falsehood does away with a soul. Do not zealously pursue death by having an erring way of life, nor draw to yourselves destruction by the works of your hands. Because God did not make death, nor does He rejoice in the destruction of the living. For He fashioned all things that they might have being, and the creatures of the world are wholesome, and there is not a destructive drug among them, nor does the netherworld have any domain on earth. For righteousness is immortal, but the gain of unrighteousness is death. Chapter 2. But it was impious men who, with their hands and their words, summoned death, and considering it a friend, were consumed by it. And they made a covenant with it, because they deserve to be a part of his portion. For not thinking correctly, they said among themselves, "Brief and troublous is our lifetime, and there is no remedy for a man's passing away, and no one is known to have been released from the netherworld. Because we were born by mere chance, and in the future we shall be as though we had never been. Because the breath in our nostrils is smoke, and our rationalization is a spark kindled at the beating of our heart. When this heart is extinguished, the body will be ashes, and the spirit will be dissolved like unresisting air. Even our name will be forgotten in time, and no one will recall our deeds. So our lifetime will pass away like the traces of a cloud, and will be dispersed like a mist, pursued by the sun's rays and overpowered by its heat. For our season is the passing of a shadow, and there is no return after our passing away, because it is fixed with a seal, and no one returns. Therefore, come, let us enjoy the good things that are real, and use the freshness of creation avidly. Let us have our fill of costly wine and perfumes, and let no springtime blossom pass us by. Let us wreathe ourselves with rosebuds before they wither. Let none of us be left without a share in our wantonness. Everywhere, let us leave tokens of our rejoicing, because this is our portion and this our lot. Let us oppose the righteous poor man. Let us neither spare the widow nor revere the elder, for his hair has grown gray with time. But let our strength be our law of righteousness, for weakness proves itself to be useless. Let us beset the righteous one, because he is obnoxious to us, and sets himself against our doings, and reproaches us for transgressions of the law, and charges us with sins against our education. He professes to have knowledge of God, and styles himself a boy of the Lord. To us, he is a censure of our thoughts. Merely to see him is a hardship for us, because his manner of living is not like other men's, and his ways are different. He judges us debased, and holds aloof from our paths as from an uncleanness. He calls the destiny of righteous men blessed, and boasts that God is his father. Let us see whether his accounts are true, and let us test what will happen to him. For if the righteous one is the Son of God, he will defend him and deliver him from the hands of his opponents. Let us examine him with wanton violence and torture, that we may have proof of his gentleness and try his patience. Let us sentence him to a shameful death, for according to his own accounts, he will be overseen by God. These were their thoughts, and they erred, for their malice blinded them, and they did not know the hidden counsels of God. Neither did they believe that there was a recompense of holiness, nor discern the reward for blameless souls. Because God formed man to be imperishable, and made him in the image of his own eternity. But by the envy of a slanderer, death entered the world. But those who are in his possession experience it. Chapter 3. But the souls of righteous men are in the hand of God, and no torture shall touch them. In the eyes of the senseless, they seem to have died, and their departure from this life was thought to be an affliction, and their going forth from us to be their utter destruction. But they are in peace. For even if they are punished in the sight of men, their hope is still full of immortality. So chastised a little, they shall be greatly blessed, because God tested them and found them worthy of himself. Like gold in the furnace, he proved them, and like a sacrificial holocaust, he accepted them with himself. And in the season of their visitation, they shall shine, and shall dart about as sparks through stubble. They shall judge nations and rule over peoples, and the Lord shall be their king throughout the ages. Those who trust in him shall understand truth, and the faithful shall abide with him in love. Because grace and mercy are with his holy ones, and his mercy is with his elect ones. But the impious ones shall receive a punishment to match their thoughts, since they neglected righteousness and forsook the Lord. For he who despises wisdom and education is disdained. Vain is their hope, and fruitless are their labors, and worthless are their works. Their wives are senseless, and their children wicked. Even more accursed is their offspring. Because blessed is the woman who, childless and undefiled, knew not transgression of the marriage bed. She shall bear fruit at the visitation of souls. And blessed is the eunuch, whose hand wrought no lawless deed, who held no wicked thoughts against the Lord. For he shall be given faithfulness's choice reward, and a more gratifying heritage in the Lord's inner sanctum. For the fruit of noble struggles is a glorious one, and unfailing is the root of mindfulness. But children of adulterers will remain without issue, and the seed of an unlawful bed will be eliminated. For should they be long-lived, they will be held in no esteem, and their old age will be dishonored at last. If they pass away abruptly, they will have no hope, nor comfort in the day of scrutiny. For dire is the end of an unrighteous generation. Chapter 4. Better is childlessness with excellence, for immortal is its memory, because it is acknowledged both by God and by men. When it is present, men imitate it, and they yearn for it when it is gone. And throughout the age, it marches crowned in triumph, victorious in a contest for unsullied prizes. But a prolific multitude of impious men shall be of no avail, and none of their illegitimate offshoots will strike deep root, nor take a firm hold. For even though their branches flourish for a season, they are unsteady, and shall be rocked by the wind, and by the violence of the winds uprooted. Their twigs shall be broken off untimely, and their fruit shall be useless, unripe for eating, and fit for nothing. For children born of lawless unions, when they are examined, are testifiers of the wickedness of their parents. But a righteous man, though he pass away early, shall be at rest. For the age which is honorable comes not with the passing of time, nor can it be measured in terms of years. But mindfulness is the gray hair for men, and an unsullied manner of life the attainment of old age. He who pleased God was loved, and he who lived among sinners was taken up, snatched away, lest malice pervert his mind, or deceit beguile his soul. For the fascination of malice obscures what is beautiful, and the whirl of yearning transforms the innocent mind. Having become perfect in a short while, he reached the fullness of his long career. For his soul was pleasing to the Lord. Therefore, he sped him out of the midst of wickedness. But the people saw and did not understand, nor did they take this into account, that grace and mercy are with his elect ones, and that he cares for his sacred ones. Now a righteous man who has died condemns the impious men who are alive, and youth swiftly passing away condemns the many years of an unrighteous man grown old. For they see the passing away of a wise man, and do not understand what the Lord purposed for him, or why he made him secure. They see and hold him in contempt, but the Lord laughs them to scorn. And afterward they shall become dishonored carcasses, and an outrage among the corpses throughout the age. Because he shall strike them down speechless, and prostrate and rock them to their foundations. And they shall be utterly laid waste, and shall be in grief, and their memory shall perish. When their sins are counted up, they shall come with terror, and their lawless deeds shall convict them to their face. Chapter 5. Then the righteous one, with great confidence, shall stand before the face of those who oppressed him, and those who make light of his labors. Seeing this, they shall be troubled with a terrible fear, and they shall be amazed at his unexpected salvation. they shall say among themselves, changing their mind, and groaning through a constrained spirit. This is the man whom we once held as a laughingstock, and as an illustration of mockery. We were the senseless ones. We accounted his lifetime as madness, and is passing away dishonored. See how he is numbered among the sons of God, and how his lot is with the holy ones. Yes, we have strayed from the way of truth, and the light of righteousness did not shine upon us, and the sun did not rise for us. We had our fill of the paths of lawlessness and of destruction, and we journeyed through impassable deserts. But the way of the Lord we did not know. What did our arrogance profit us? And what has wealth, along with its false pretension, afforded us? All of them passed like a shadow, and like a message which escapes unnoticed. Like a ship traversing the surging water, of which, when it has passed, no trace can be found, nor a pathway in the keel of its surges. Or, like a bird flying through the air, no evidence of its course is to be found, but the fluid current, lashed by its beating pinions, and cleft by the whizzing force of speeding wings, is traversed, and afterwards no sign of its advance can be found in it. Or, as when a missile has been shot at a target, the parted air flows together again at once, so that no one perceives the pathway which it took. And even so, we, once born, abruptly came to nothing, and indeed held no sign of manliness to display. But we were entirely consumed in our evil. Yes, the hope of impious men is like thistledown born on a wind, and like a fine tempest-driven hoarfrost, and like a smoke dispersed by a wind, and like the passing memory of a nomad camping for a single day. But righteous men live even to the age, and their recompense is in the Lord, and the concern for them is with the Most High. So then, they shall receive the splendid kingdom, and the beautiful diadem from the hand of the Lord, because he shall shelter them with his right hand, and shield them with his arm. He shall take his zeal for his full suit of armor, and he shall turn the creation into weapons to ward off his enemies. He shall don righteousness for a breastplate, and shall wear impartial judgment for a helmet. He shall take invincible sacredness for a round shield, but sharpen his sudden anger for a long sword. But the world shall join him to fight against the deranged. Well-aimed projectiles of lightning shall go forth, and they shall leap from the clouds to the target as from a well-drawn bow. and hailstones full of wrath shall be hurled as from a rock thrower. The water of the sea shall be indignant against them, but the streams shall relentlessly overflow. A powerful wind shall confront them, and like a tempest it shall winnow them out. And lawlessness shall lay the whole earth waste, and the evil doing shall overturn thrones of masters. Chapter 6. Therefore listen, O kings, and understand. Learn, you judges of the ends of the earth. Give ear, you who rule over a multitude, and exult over crowds of nations. Because the dominion was given to you by the Lord, and sovereignty by the Most High, who shall probe your works and scrutinize your counsels. Because, though you were servants of his kingdom, you did not discern rightly, nor keep the law, nor walk according to the counsel of God. Horribly and swiftly shall he come against you, because severe condemnation befalls those who are above others. For the lowly man may be pardoned out of mercy, but a powerful man shall be powerfully put to the test. For the master of all takes no regard of any man's countenance, nor does he reverence greatness. Because he himself made the great as well as the small, he also foresees everyone alike. But rigorous scrutiny is impending for those in power. Therefore, O tyrants, my discourses are addressed to you, so that you may learn wisdom and not fall away. For those who keep the sacred precepts sacred shall be found sacred, and those taught in them will have found a defense. Therefore, desire my discourses, long for them, and you will be educated. Wisdom is radiant and unfading, and she is easily perceived by those who love her, and found by those who seek her. She hastens to make herself known in anticipation of men's desire. He who watches for her at dawn shall not grow weary, for he shall find her sitting by his gates. For taking thought of her is the completion of mindfulness, and he who, if vigilant for her sake, will quickly be free from care. Because she makes her own rounds, seeking those worthy of her, and she graciously appears to them in their paths, and meets them in every thought. For the beginning of wisdom is a very earnest yearning for her, but concern for education is a love of her. But love means the keeping of her laws. But to observe her laws is a confirmation of incorruptibility. but incorruptibility makes one close to God. In this way, the yearning for wisdom leads up to a kingdom. Therefore, you tyrants over the peoples, if you find pleasure in throne and scepter, honor wisdom, so that you may reign into the age. Now, I shall bring a message to you about what wisdom is, and how she came to be. And I shall hide no mysteries from you. Instead, I shall search her out from the beginning of her existence, and bring the knowledge of her to light. And I shall not pass by the truth, nor shall I travel in the company of consuming envy, because envy has no communion with wisdom. Now a multitude of wise men is the salvation of the world, and a mindful king the stability of the populace. So be educated by my words, and you will profit. Chapter 7. I indeed am a mortal man, the same as all the rest, and a descendant of the first formed man born on earth. And in my mother's womb, I was molded into flesh. In a period of 10 months, compacted with blood, from the seed of a man and the pleasure which accompanies marriage. But I also, when born, inhaled the common air, and fell upon the kindred earth. Wailing, I uttered that first sound shared by all. In swaddling clothes, I was nursed, and with constant concerns. For no king has any different beginning of existence. But as there is one entrance into a lifetime for everyone, there is also one common departure. For this reason, I prayed, and mindfulness was given to me. I pleaded, and a spirit of wisdom came to me. I preferred her to scepter and throne, and considered riches to be nothing in comparison with her. Nor did I liken her to any priceless stone, because all the gold in view of her is but a little sand, and before her, silver is to be accounted as mire. Beyond health and a beautiful form, I loved her, and I chose to have her rather than light, because her splendor never sleeps. Now everything that is good came to me together in her company, and countless riches at her hands. But I rejoiced in them all, because wisdom leads them. But I did not know that she was their mother. I also learned about her without guile. I also share ungrudgingly. Her riches I do not hide away. For she is an unfailing treasure to men. Those who gain this treasure win a friendship with God, commended to him for the gifts which they have received from education. Now may God grant that I speak with knowledge, and to worthily reflect on what has been given to me, because he is a guide even of wisdom, and the reformer of the wise. For both we and our accounts are in his hand, as well as all mindfulness and experience of crafts. For he gave me faultless knowledge of existing things, that I might know the constitution of the world and the operation of its elements, the beginning and the end, and the midpoint of times, changes of the sun's course, and variations of the seasons, cycles of years, and positions of stars, natures of animals, and furies of wild beasts, mights of spirits, and rationalizations of men, diversities of plants, and powers of roots. I learned both what is hidden and what is plain. For wisdom, the artisan of all, taught me. For in her is a spirit which is intellectual, holy, unique, manifold, subtle, easily mobile, clear, undefiled, certain, unharmable, loving the good, keen, unhampered, beneficent, humane, firm, immovable, carefree, all-powerful, all-overseeing, and pervading all spirits, though they be intellectual, clean, and subtle. For wisdom is mobile beyond all motion, but she penetrates and pervades all things by reason of her cleanness. For she is a vapor of the power of God, and a pure effusion of the glory of the Almighty. For this reason, nothing that is stained gains entrance into her. For she is a refulgence of everlasting light, and a clear mirror of the energy of God, and an image of his goodness. But she, who is one, can do all things, and renews everything while herself perduring, and passing into sacred souls from generation to generation. She furnishes friends of God and prophets. For there is nothing God loves so much as the one who dwells with wisdom. For she is more attractive than the sun, and surpasses every position of the stars. Compared to light, she takes precedence. For indeed, night supplants the light, but evil does not prevail over wisdom. Chapter 8. Now she reaches mightily from end to end, and administers all things well. I loved her, and sought after her from my youth, and I sought to take her for my bride, and was a passionate desirer of her beauty. To her nobility of birth, she adds the glory of a companionship with God. Even the Master of all loves her. For she is an initiate in the experience of God, and a selector of His works. Now, if riches are a desirable possession in one's lifetime, what is richer than wisdom, who produces all things? Now, if mindfulness is productive, who among what exists is a better craftsman than she? And if a man loves righteousness, the fruits of her labors are excellences. For she teaches sound-mindedness and mindfulness, righteousness and manliness. Nor is there anything in one's lifetime more useful for men than these things. But also, if one yearns for much experience, she knows things from the beginning and infers those yet to come. She is versed in the turnings of discourses and the solutions of riddles. She has foreknowledge of signs' importance and of the outcome of seasons and times. Moreover, I determined to take her to live with me, knowing that she would be my counselor while all was good, and my advice in concerns and in grief. For her sake, I should have glory among the crowds, and honor from elders, though I am but a youth. I should become keen in judgment, and should be marveled at in the sight of powerful men. They would abide my silence, and attend my utterance. And as I uttered words at greater length, they would place their hands upon their mouths. For her sake, I should have immortality, and leave an age-long memory to those who come after me. I should administer peoples, and nations would be subject to me. Horrible tyrants, hearing of me, would fear me. In the multitude, I should appear good, and in war, manly. Within my house, I should sleep beside her. For this companionship with her involves no bitterness, nor does living with her involve any pain, but instead, merriment and joy. When I took account of these things within myself, and reflected them in my heart, that there is immortality in kinship with wisdom, and good pleasure in her friendship, and unfailing riches in the toils of her hands, and that there is mindfulness in the frequenting of her company, and good renown in communing with her accounts. I went about seeking how to take her for my own. Now, I was a well-favored boy, and was also allotted a good soul. But rather, being good, I attained an unstained body. But knowing that I could not otherwise possess her unless God gave her. Now this too was mindfulness, to know whose favor she was. I went to the Lord and besought him, and said with my whole heart. Chapter 9. God of my fathers, Lord of the mercy, you who have made all things by your rationalization, and in your wisdom have established a man to be master over the creatures made by you, and to manage the world in sacredness and righteousness, and to render judgment in integrity of soul. Give me wisdom, the one sitting beside your throne, and do not reject me from among your boys, because I am your slave, a son of your girl, a man without strength and short-lived, and lacking in intelligence of judgment and of laws. For even if one is perfect among the sons of men, yet without wisdom, who comes from you, he shall be accounted as nothing. You have chosen me to be a king over your people, and a judge for your sons and daughters. You say that I should build an inner sanctum on your holy mountain, and a sacrificial altar in the city that is your nest, a copy of the holy dwelling place which you established from the beginning. And with you is wisdom, who knows your works, and was present when you were making the world, and who understands what is pleasing in your eyes, and what is conformable with your instructions. Send her forth from your holy heavens, and dispatch her from your throne of glory, that she may be with me and work with me, and that I may know what is pleasing to you. For she knows and understands all things, and will guide me with a sound mind in my affairs, and keep guard over me by her glory. And then my works will be acceptable, and I shall judge your people rightly, and be worthy of my Father's throne. For what man knows God's counsel, or who can conceive what the Lord intends? For the rationalizations of mortals are anxious, and our plans are unsure. For a corruptible body burdens a soul, and this earthly tent weighs down a mind which has many concerns. And we can scarcely guess the things on earth, and what is within our hands we find with toil. But when things are in the heavens, who can search them out? But who ever knew your counsel, except when you had given wisdom, and sent your Holy Spirit from the highest places. And this was how the paths of those on earth were made straight, and men were taught what was pleasing to you, and were saved by wisdom. Chapter 10. She guarded the first-formed Father of the world, when he alone had been created. And she raised him up from his blunder, and also gave him strength to rule all things. But when an unrighteous man withdrew from her in his anger, he perished together with his fratricidal fury. When the earth was flooded because of him, wisdom again saved it, piloting the righteous man on frailest wood. When the nations were commingled in harmonious wickedness, she also knew the righteous man and kept him blameless before God, and kept him strong, although he had feelings for his child. She delivered a righteous man from among impious men who were utterly perishing, when he fled as fire descended upon 5 cities. There, a testimony of its wickedness still remains, a smoking wasteland, and plants bearing fruit which never ripens, and a pillar of salt standing as a memorial of a disbelieving soul. For first of all, those who forsook wisdom were bereft of the knowledge of what is beautiful. Instead, they even left to their lifetime a remembrance of their senselessness, so that they could not even be hidden in their fall. But wisdom delivered from troubles those who served her. When a righteous man fled from his brother's anger, she guided him on straight paths, showed him the kingdom of God, and gave him knowledge of holy things. She prospered him in his labors, and multiplied the fruit of his toils, stood by him against the greed of those who were prevailing over him, and enriched him. She preserved him from enemies, and secured him from those who laid in ambush. And she gave him a prize for his strong struggle, that he might know that piety is more powerful than everything else. When a righteous man was sold, she did not abandon him. Instead, she delivered him from a sin. She went down with him into the pit, and did not desert him in his bonds, until she brought him a scepter of royalty and authority over those who tyrannized him, showed those who had defamed him false, and gave him age-long glory. A sacred people and blameless seed, it was she who delivered them from a nation who oppressed them. She entered a soul of a servant of the Lord, and withstood fearsome kings with portents and signs. She gave the sacred ones a recompense of their labors. she conducted them by a marvelous way, and became a shelter for them by day, and a flame of stars by the night. She took them across the sea of reeds, and brought them through the deep waters. But she flooded their enemies, and cast them up from the depths of an abyss. For this reason, righteous men despoiled impious men, and they sang, "O Lord, the name of the Holy One," also harmoniously praising your defending hand. Because wisdom opened the mouths of the mute ones, and made tongues of infants speak clearly. Chapter 11. She made their works prosper by a hand of a holy prophet. They journeyed through the uninhabited wilderness, and pitched their tents in untrodden places. They withstood foes and repelled their enemies. And when they thirsted, they called upon you, and water was given to them from a sheer rock, and a remedy for their thirst from a hard stone. For by the things through which their enemies were chastised, they themselves were benefited in their need. Indeed, rather than running water, when an ever-flowing river was troubled with defiled blood, as a rebuke to an infant slain command, you unexpectedly gave the sacred ones abundant water, once you had shown, by the thirst they had at that time, how you chastised their opponents. For when the sacred ones had been tried, though only corrected in mercy, they recognized how impious men, condemned in anger, were being examined by torture. For indeed, you tested the sacred ones, admonishing them as a father. But you rightly punished the others as a severe king. But even those afar off, and those close by, were harmoniously afflicted. For a twofold grief took hold of them, and a moaning at the memory of the ones who had departed. For when they heard that the cause of their own chastisements was a benefit to these others, they recognized the Lord. For though they had indeed mockingly rejected him who of old had been cast out in exposure, in the end of the events, they marveled at him, since the thirst they felt was not like that of the righteous ones. But in return for their unintelligent and unrighteous rationalizations, which led them astray into worshiping irrational creepers and worthless insects, you sent upon them a multitude of irrational animals for a rightful punishment, that they might recognize that a man is chastised by the very things through which he sins. For your all-powerful hand, which had fashioned the world from formless matter, was not without means to send upon them a multitude of bears, or bold lions, or newly created unknown beasts full of fury, either blowing out a fire-breathing breath, or a belch of winnowing smoke, or flashing terrible sparks from their eyes. not only could the harm they would do completely wipe them out, instead, even the mere sight of them causing fear could slay them. But even without these, they could have fallen by a single spirit, pursued by the rightful punishment and winnowed out by your powerful spirit. Instead, you have arranged all things by measure and number and weight. For great strength always abides with you, and who can oppose the might of your arm? Because before you, the whole world is like a grain that tips the scales, and like a drop of morning dew which falls upon the earth. But you have mercy upon all, because you can do all things. And you overlook the sins of men, that they may have a change of mind. For you love everything that exists, and do not loathe anything you have made. For what you hated, you would not have fashioned. But how could a thing remain unless you willed it, or be preserved had it not been called forth by you? But you spare all things, because they are yours. O Master, lover of souls, for your incorruptible spirit is in all things. Chapter 12. For this reason, you rebuke those who fall away, little by little. Warn them, and remind them of the things through which they sin, that they may abandon their evil and put their faith in you, O Lord. For even the ancient inhabitants of your holy land, you hated for their hostile practices, works of sorceries and unsacred rites. They are also merciless murderers of children, and partakers of a sacrificial cannibal feast of human flesh and blood, initiates from the midst of an impious company, and parents who took helpless souls with their own hands. These you wish to perish by the hands of our fathers, that the land, which above all is held in honor by you, might receive a worthy colony of God's boys. Instead, even these, as they were men, you spared, also sending wasps as forerunners of your army, that they might exterminate them by degrees. Not that you were without power to have impious men vanquished in a pitched battle by righteous men, or crushed at once by terrible wild beasts, or by a single stern word, but condemning them bit by bit. You gave them space for a change of mind. You were not ignorant that their generation was wicked and their evil ingrained, and that their rationalizations would not change even to the age. For they were a seed accursed from the beginning. But neither was it because you were wary of anyone that you granted amnesty when they were sinning. For who can say to you, "What have you done?" Or who can oppose your verdict? But when nations perish, who can challenge you, their maker? Or who can come into your presence to maintain the rights of unrighteous men? For neither is there any God besides you, whose care is for everyone, that you need to prove that you have not unrighteously judged. Nor can any king or tyrant confront you on behalf of those whom you have chastised. But as you are righteous, you manage all things righteously. You hold it as foreign to your power to chastise one who does not deserve to be rightfully punished. For your strength is the beginning of righteousness, and your mastery over all things makes you lenient to all. For you show your strength when faith is not put in the perfection of your power, and you rebuke any audacity among those who know you. But though you are a master of strength, you judge with gentleness, and you administer us with much lenience. For whenever you will, the power attends you. But by these works, you taught your people that those who are righteous must be humane. And you filled your sons with a good hope, because you would permit to have a change of mind from their sins. For these were enemies of your boys and doomed to death. Yet, while you brought retribution upon them with such solicitude and indulgence, granting a time and place to abandon their evil, with what exactitude you judged your sons, to whose fathers you gave oaths and covenants of good promises. Therefore, you correct us and scourge our enemies with 10,000 blows, that we may meditate upon your goodness when we judge, but when being judged, we may expect mercy. And unrighteous men who lived a life of senselessness, you examine by torture through their own abominations. For even they went far astray on paths of error, taking even for gods the disgraceful and dishonored among animals, deceived like senseless infants. For this reason, as though upon irrational boys, you sent your judgment upon them as a mockery. But those who did not heed the censure, which was but child's play, were to experience a judgment worthy of God. For in the things through which they suffered distress, since they were chastised by the very things they deemed gods, they saw and recognized the true God whom they had before refused to know. And with this, their final rightful punishment came upon them. Chapter 13. For indeed, all men who had ignorance of God were futile by nature, and from the good things which are seen, they were not strong enough to know him who is, nor did they discern the artisan while studying his works. Instead, either fire or wind or swift air or a circuit of stars or mighty water, or luminaries of heaven, the presidents of the world. They considered gods. Indeed, if through delight in their beauty, they assumed them to be gods, let them know how far more excellent is the Master than these. For the original source of beauty fashioned them. But if they were struck with astonishment at the power and energy of these, let these things bring them realization of how much more powerful is He who made them. For from the greatness and beauty of created things, their original author, by analogy, is seen. Instead, for these men, the blame is less. For perhaps they even have gone astray, though they are seeking God and wishing to find Him. For they search busily among His works, and are distracted by what they see, because the things seen are beautiful. But again, not even these are pardonable. For if they had the strength to know so much that they could speculate about the age, how did they not more quickly find the master of these things? But they are doomed, and their hopes are in dead things. Those who give the name gods to the works of human hands. Gold and silver, a product of art, and likenesses of animals, or useless stone, a work of an ancient hand. Now an artisan may even saw out a suitable tree, skillfully scrape off all its bark, and deftly plying his art, produce a useful implement to serve life, but use up the refuse from his work in preparing his food, and have his fill. But the good-for-nothing refuse from these remnants, timber, crooked and full of knots, he takes, carving it to occupy his spare time. This timber he models with listless experience, and patterns it on an image of a man, or makes it resemble some worthless animal. He daubs it with red, and crimsons its surface with a red stain, and daubs over every blemish in it. And he makes a fitting room for it, putting it on a wall, fastening it with a nail. Therefore, indeed, lest it fall down, he provides for it, because he knows that it cannot help itself, for it is even an image and is in need of help. But when he prays about his possessions and marriage and children, he is not ashamed to address the thing without a soul. And indeed, for vigor, he invokes the strengthless. But for life, he entreats the dead. But for aid, he beseeches the wholly incompetent. But about travel, something that cannot even walk. But for a means of monetary gain and work and success with his hands, he asks facility of a thing with hands completely inert. Chapter 14. Again, one preparing for a voyage and about to traverse surging waves, cries out to a piece of wood more unsound than a boat which carries him. For indeed, it was a desire for profits which devised that vessel. But wisdom was an artisan who produced it. But your foresight, O Father, steers it, because you have furnished a way for it, even in the sea, in a safe path through surging waves, showing that you can save from any danger, so that even one without a craft may embark. But it is your will that the works of your wisdom should not be idle. So men entrust their souls even to a frailest piece of wood, and have been safe crossing waves even on a raft. For even at the beginning, when arrogant giants were perishing, the hope of the world, who took refuge on a raft, left to the age a future for his seed under the piloting of your hand. For blessed is a piece of wood through which righteousness comes about, but the hand-made idol is accursed, and its maker as well, indeed, he for having produced it, but it, because though perishable, it was named a god. For equally hateful to God are those who act impiously and their impiety. For even the thing made shall be chastised together with its contriver. For this reason, a visitation shall come even upon idols of the nations, because they have become an abomination amid God's creation, and stumbling blocks for souls of men, and a trap for the feet of senseless men. For the beginning of fornication is a devising of idols, but their invention was a corruption of life. For they were not in the beginning, nor shall they continue to the age. For by vanity of men they came into the world, and for this reason a sudden end is devised for them. For a father, afflicted with untimely mourning, made an image of the child so quickly taken from him. And this father now honored as a god what was formerly a dead man, and handed down to his subjects mysteries and rites. Then, in time, the impious custom gained strength, and was observed as a law, and carved things were religiously observed by commands of tyrants. Men who lived so far away that they could not honor him in appearance copied the appearance of the distant king, making a visible image of him whom they wished to honor, out of earnestness to flatter him when absent, as though present. But the artisan's love of honor provided a stimulus to promote this religious observance among those to whom it was strange. For he, indeed, perhaps wishing to please a ruler, compelled his art to give the likeness a more beautiful form. But the multitude, drawn by the charm of the work, soon rationalized that he should now be an object of worship, who shortly before was honored as a man. And this became an ambush for their lifetime, that men, enslaved to either a misfortune or tyranny, conferred the incommunicable name on stones and pieces of wood. Then, it was not enough for them to err in their knowledge of God. Instead, even though they live in a great war of ignorance, they call such many evils peace. For while they celebrate either child-murdering rites or clandestine mysteries, or frenzied revelings in unheard-of ordinances, they no longer safeguard either their lifetimes or clean marriages, but each either does away with one another in ambuscades or pains one another by adulterating him. But all is confusion, blood and murder, theft and treachery, corruption, faithlessness, turmoil, perjury, disturbance of good men, forgetfulness of favor, staining of souls, sexual perversion, disorder in marriage, adultery and licentiousness. For the worship of infamous idols is a beginning and cause and extremity of all evil. For they are either driven mad with enjoyment, or prophesy lies, or live unrighteously, or readily commit perjury. For as their trust is in soulless idols, they expect to suffer nothing unrighteous when they have sworn evilly. But on both accounts, righteous punishment shall overtake them, because they were evilly minded toward God, devoting themselves to idols, and because they deliberately swore unrighteous oaths, despising sacredness. For it is not the power of things by which men swear. Instead, it is the rightful punishment for the sinners, which always pursues the transgression of the unrighteous ones. Chapter 15. But you, our God, are kind and true, long-suffering, and administering everything with mercy. For even if we sin, we are yours, seeing your might. But we will not sin, seeing that we are accounted as yours. For to know you well is complete righteousness, and to see your might is a root of immortality. For we were neither led astray by the evil creation of men's inventiveness, nor the fruitless toil of painters, a form stained with varied colors, whose appearance arouses yearning in senseless men, till they also long for the inanimate form of a dead image. Lovers of evil things, also worthy of such hopes, are even those who make them, and long for them, and show piety to them. For even a potter, laboriously kneading soft earth, molds each article for our service. Yet, out of the same clay, he fashions both the vessels which serve for clean purposes, and their opposites all alike. But, as to what shall be the use of either sort of vessels, the worker in clay is the judge. And with misspent toil, he molds a vain god from the self-same clay, though he himself was made from earth a short time before, and after a little while is to return from where he was taken, when the soul which was lent to him is demanded back. Instead, he has no concerns that he is destined to die, nor that his lifetime is brief. Instead, he vies with goldsmiths and silversmiths, also emulates bronze workers, and considers it a glory to mold counterfeits. His heart is ashes, and his hope is more worthless than earth. Also, his lifetime is more dishonorable than clay, because he failed to know the one who fashioned him, and who breathed into him an active soul, and blew into him a living spirit. Instead, he accounted our lifetime child's play, and our lifetime a holiday for gain. For one must, declares he, make profit every way, be it even out of evil. For this man, more than any, sees that he is sinning, when out of earthen material he creates fragile vessels and carved images alike. But all quite senseless, and worse than infantile in soul, are the enemies of your people who exercised power over them. Because they even accounted all the idols of the nations gods, which have no use of the eyes for vision, nor nostrils to inhale air, nor ears to hear, nor fingers on their hands for feeling. Even their feet are useless to walk with. For a man made them, and they were fashioned by one whose own spirit has been borrowed. For no man is strong enough to mold a god like himself. But being mortal, he makes a dead thing with his lawless hands. For he is better than the thing he worships. Of the two, he indeed has life, but never they. And besides, they worship the most hostile animals. For those, when compared in regards to mindlessness, are worse than all others. Nor are these animals so beautiful in sight that men might desire them. But they have even escaped the approval of God and his good word about them. Chapter 16. For this reason, those impious men deserve to be chastised by similar animals, and were examined by torture, by a swarm of insects. Rather than this chastisement, you benefited your people with a rare taste. You satisfied the craving of their appetite by providing quail for their food, in order that those impious others, when they craved food, should be turned from even the appetite of necessities, since the creatures you sent to plague them were so hideous. While your people, after a brief period of privation, even partook of a rare taste. For inexorable want had to come upon those who were tyrannizing. But these only needed to be shown how their enemies were being examined by torture. For even when the terrible fury of wild beasts came upon them, also when they were being utterly destroyed by bites of crooked serpents, your anger did not endure to the end. But as a warning, they were troubled for only a short time. Though they had a sign of salvation, to remind them of an instruction of your law. For he who turned toward it was saved, not by what he saw, but instead by you, the Savior of all. But by this, you even convinced our enemies that you are he who delivers from every evil. For indeed, the bites of locusts and of flies killed them, and no remedy was found to save their soul, because they deserve to be chastised by such means. But not even the teeth of poisonous dragons were victorious over your sons. For your mercy brought the antidote and healed them. For as a reminder of your oracles, they were stung, and swiftly they were saved, lest they should fall into deep forgetfulness, becoming unresponsive to your beneficence. For even neither herb nor lotion treated them. Instead, it was your all-healing discourse, O Lord. For you have authority over life and death, and you lead down to the gates of the netherworld and lead back. But a man indeed kills in his evil, but when a spirit has departed, it does not return, nor can he release a soul once it is confined. But it is impossible to escape from your hand. For impious men who refuse to know you were scourged by the strength of your arm, pursued by rare rains and hailstorms, and unremitting rain showers, and consumed by fire. For, against all expectation, in water which quenches everything, the fire grew more active. For the world fights on behalf of righteous men. For indeed, at one time, the flame was tempered, so that the animals which were sent upon the impious ones might not be incinerated, but instead that these men, seeing this, might know that they were beaten by a judgment of God. But again, even in water, the fire blazed beyond its strength, so as to utterly destroy the produce of an unrighteous land. Rather than this, you nourished your people with food of messengers, and furnished them with bread from heaven, ready to eat, untoiled for, endowed with all delights and conforming to every taste. For indeed, this substance of yours revealed your sweetness toward your children. But serving the craving of him who received it, it was transformed into whatever flavor each one wished. But snow and ice withstood fire and did not melt, so that they might know that the fruits of their enemies were utterly destroyed by a fire which blazed in the hailstorm and flashed like lightning in the rain. But this element, in order that righteous men might be nourished, forgot even its own unique power. For your creation, serving you, its maker, grows tense to bring a chastisement upon the unrighteous ones, and in a good work is relaxed on behalf of those who put their faith in you. For this reason, at that very time also, it, transformed into all sorts of ways, was serving your all-nourishing bounty, in accordance with the will of the needy men, so that your sons, whom you loved, might learn, O Lord, that it is not the various kinds of fruits which nourish a man, but instead that it is your word which preserves those who put their faith in you. For what was not destroyed by the fire was melted, when merely warmed by a momentary ray of the sun, so that men might know that one must rise before the sun to give you thanks, and converse with you at the rising of the light. For the hope of an unthankful man melts like a wintry frost, and runs off like useless water. Chapter 17. For great are your judgments, and hard to describe. For this reason, the uneducated souls have gone astray. For when lawless men thought to exercise power over the holy nation, they themselves, shackled with darkness and fettered by a long night, lay shut up beneath their own roofs, exiles from the age-long foresight. For supposing that their secret sins were hid under a dark curtain of oblivion, they were dispersed in marveling in terror, perturbed by specters. For not even their inner chambers kept them fearless, but crashing sounds on all sides perturbed them, and mute phantoms with somber faces appeared. And indeed, no vigor, even of fire, was able to give light. Nor did the brilliant flames of the stars succeed in lighting up that gloomy night. But all that showed through to them was an intermittent self-kindled fire, full of fear. But greatly terrified, they considered that beholding these things was worse than the times when that sight was no longer to be seen. But mockeries of their magic art were in readiness, and a jeering reproof of the false pretension of their so-called mindfulness. For those who undertook to banish anxieties and disorders from a sick soul were themselves sickened with a ridiculous timidity. For even though no monstrous thing caused them to fear, they were scared by the passings of insects and hissings of creepers. And trembling, they perished, reluctant to face even the air, which they could nowhere escape. For wickedness, anxious in its nature, is rightfully judged by its own testimony. But because of a distressed conscience, it always increases misfortunes. For fear is nothing but a surrender of the helps which come from rationalization. But the more one's expectation is of itself uncertain, the more one rationalizes that it is better to have ignorance of the cause which is bringing torture. Now they, throughout that night, powerless though it was, and which had come upon them from the recesses of a powerless netherworld, while all sleeping the same sleep, were, indeed, partly beaten by portents of phantasms, and partly paralyzed by their souls' surrender. For fear came upon them, sudden and unexpected. Then, in this manner, whoever was there fell down, confined in that prison not made of iron. For whether one was a farmer, or a shepherd, or a worker at tasks in a desert, taken unawares, he served out the inescapable sentence. For all were bound by one chain of darkness. Whether it was only a whistling wind, or a melodious song of birds in the wide-spreading branches, or a steady rhythm of rushing water, or a harsh crash of overthrown rocks, or an unseen gallop of bounding animals, or a sound of wild beasts harshly howling, or an echo resounding from a hollow of the mountains. These sounds, instilling fear, paralyzed them. For the whole world shone with a brilliant light, and continued its works without interruption. But an oppressive night spread over these impious men alone, an image of the darkness which should next come upon them. But they were more burdensome to themselves than the darkness. Chapter 18. But your sacred ones had a very great light. Indeed, the impious ones heard their voices, but did not see their forms. Indeed, they even pronounced them happy for not having suffered as they did. But because the sacred ones, who had formerly been treated unrighteously, did not harm them, they thanked them and begged their pardon for having been at variance with them. Rather than this, you furnished your sacred ones with a flaming pillar. Indeed, it was a guide on the unknown journey, but a harmless sun for an honorable migration. For indeed, their enemies deserve to be deprived of light and imprisoned by darkness, who had kept your sons confined, through whom the imperishable light of the law was to be given to the age. Now when the impious ones had taken counsel to kill the infants of the sacred ones, and when a single child had been cast forth and saved, as a reproof, you carried off a multitude of their children, and made them perish all at once in a vehement water. That night was known beforehand to our fathers, so that, surely knowing the oaths in which they put their faith, they might rejoice. Your people indeed awaited a salvation of righteous men, but a destruction of their enemies. For by the same means by which you wreak vengeance on our opponents, in this you glorified us whom you had summoned. For in secret, the sacred boys of the good people were offering sacrifice, and in harmony were putting the divinity of the law into effect, so that your holy ones should share alike the same good things and dangers, previously singing the praises of the fathers. But a discordant cry from their enemies sung in answer. and a piteous sound of lamentation for boys was born to them. But a slave was chastised with the same rightful punishment as a master. Even a commoner suffered the same as a king. But all alike, by a single death, had countless corpses. For the living were not even sufficient to bury them, since at a single instant, their most honored generation was utterly destroyed. For though they had disbelieved at every turn on account of sorceries, at the destruction of the firstborn, they confessed that your people was a son of God. For when a calm silence encompassed everything, and night in its swift course was half spent, your all-powerful rationalization bounded from the heavens' royal throne, a stern warrior into the doomed land, bearing a sharp short sword of your inexorable command. And as he alighted, he filled every place with death. And indeed, he still touched the heaven while he stood on the earth. Then at once, indeed, imaginations and terrifying dreams perturbed them. But unexpected fears assailed them. And one here, another there, hurled down half dead, each revealing the reason why he was dying. For the dreams which disturbed them had proclaimed this beforehand, lest they perish ignorant of why they suffered ill. But at one time, a trial of death touched even righteous men. And in the desert, a plague struck a multitude. Instead, the anger did not last long. For a blameless man hastened to fight as their champion, bearing a weapon of his special duty, prayer and propitiation of incense. He withstood the fury and put an end to the calamity, showing that he was your servant. But he overcame the crowd, not by bodily strength, not by operation of weapons. Instead, by a discourse, he overcame the chastiser, recalling oaths and covenants sworn with their fathers. For when corpses had already fallen one upon another in heaps, he stood in the midst, driving back the anger, and cut off the way to the living. For on his full-length robe was the whole world, and the glories of the fathers were on a carving of 4 rows of stones. And your greatness was on a diadem upon his head. To these names the destroyer yielded, but these he feared, for the mere trial of the anger was enough. Chapter 19. But the impious ones were assailed until the end by a merciless fury. For God knew beforehand what they were yet to do, that, though they themselves had agreed to the departure, and had eagerly sent them on their way, they would regret it and pursue them. For while their hands were still engaged in mourning, and were bewailing at burials of corpses, they adopted another mindless rationalization, and those whom they had entreated to depart, they pursued as fugitives. For the doom which they deserved drew them on to this end, and struck them with forgetfulness of what had befallen them, so that they might fill up the tortures of their chastisement, and that, indeed, your people might experience a glorious journey, while these impious ones met a rare type of death. For the whole creation, in its several kinds, was being made over anew, serving its natural orders, so that your boys might be preserved unharmed. The cloud was overshadowing their camp, but dry land was seen emerging out of what had previously been water. An unimpeded road emerged out of the sea of reeds, and a grassy plain out of a violent wave. After they had beheld marvelous portents, the whole nation, sheltered by your hand, passed through. For they ranged about like horses, and bounded about like lambs, praising you, O Lord, the one who had delivered them. For they still remembered what had happened in their sojourn, how indeed, rather than offspring of animals, the land brought forth gnats, but rather than fishes, the river swarmed with a multitude of frogs. But later, they also saw a new kind of bird when, prompted by craving, they asked for pleasant things to eat. For, to relieve them, quail came to them from the sea. And the retributions did not come upon the sinners, without signs given beforehand, from the vigor of the thunderbolts. For they rightly suffered for their own wicked deeds. For they even treated their guests with the more grievous hatred. For indeed, those others did not receive unknown visitors, but these made slaves of guests who were their benefactors. And not that only, but instead, what visitation was to be theirs, since they received the foreigners with enmity? But these, after receiving them with festivities, oppressed with terrible toils those who now shared with them the same rights. But they were struck even with blindness, like those others had been at the doors of the righteous one, when, surrounded by yawning darkness, each tried to find the passage to his own doors. For the elements interchanged with one another, like the strings of a harp, which produce a new melody, while the flow of music steadily persists. And this can be clearly perceived from a review of what took place. For creatures on dry land were changed into water creatures, and those that swam went over onto land. Fire maintained its own power, even in water, and water forgot its quenching nature. Flames, by contrast, neither consumed the flesh of perishable animals which walked about in them, nor melted the ice-like, quick-melting kind of immortal food. For in every way, O Lord, you magnified and glorified your people, and unfailing, you stood by them in every time and place.